Nomads. Hello everyone, welcome to another Gear Talk. We do these every other Thursday. We're talking about the Nomads today. So, you're probably wondering why I feel the way I do about the Nomads. I love the Nomads. I actually very much like the Nomads. It's the reason why we're doing the Nomads today. And that's because of the fact we're going to pull the curtain back for everyone a little bit. I really don't have anything else to bring up towards the end of the year for Gear Talks until we get to the next year when we start Baron. So we're kind of just using the Nomads for a filler. I was going to wait till later, later on instead of right back to back with the Outsiders, but here we are talking about the Nomads. I wanted to save them for later, but it didn't happen that way because normally at the end of the year, the final Gear Talk talks about the next discussion series we're going to be doing. Well, we're in the middle of one, the comic discussion series, and that's going to go for a while, and no duh, the next comic issue that comes out is the start of Baron. So you'll never guess Baron is the next section of the stories. So we kind of have to figure out what to fill with everything. And I was going to do today with Jonathan Harper, do his character discussion, but I decided, you know what? Let's save him for the end of the year because it makes about as much sense as I can make it, because I feel like ending with the Nomads is not the biggest shebang we can have. So, let's do Harper instead because, it makes a little bit more sense than the Nomads. So today, instead of talking about, normally we'll talk about, the bases and who runs them and what their current status is. We only know of one situation involving the Nomads, and for all we know, it's the only group of Nomads, which is run by Garen Paddock. So we're just going to jump in and talk about, their history and everything and kind of theorize what led them to Vaskar, where they currently are located. Here we go. The Nomad discussion series. So the Nomads. The Nomads are very interesting because they are constantly traveling, hence the name Nomads. So unlike we have with the Stranded, or the Pickers, or the Outsiders, or the Cog, or any other group we really come across, the Nomads are constantly on the move. Now, as far as we're aware, there's only two major areas we know of that they've been, but by what we know of, in between those areas, they have been moving quite a bit. So we should kind of start with how they were formed before we get into all of that for where we currently find them. And it's weird because they were originally formed by, obviously, Garen Paddock, who's the current leader. He was the past leader. He's just the leader. And when I say leader, that's a very, very loose word for the Nomads. The leader is basically this is the guy we kind of point to that's kind of in charge. Kind of. They don't really see it as yes, Paddock makes the decisions, Paddock decides what we do, Paddock is the one voice we listen to that will decide our future. No, it's more of yeah, Paddock is in charge because of everything, how he started it all, but it's more of a position of kind of merit of where you stand. It's not really of yes, our leader that'll tell us the future and bring us into prosperity. It's not seen like that. Basically, if Paddock were to say we're doing this, they're kind of going to listen to him out of respect, not because of yes, the leader has spoken. That's kind of what the leader position of the Nomads is, because they do not follow anyone's rules. Back in Judgment, when he actually finished up fighting with Kilo, he was with them for a little while. I think a few months after the events of Judgment, he was still with them. But he was always a firm believer still in the Gorazni or UIR belief of how their government is run and how they viewed things. Again, as I mentioned in previous videos, it's kind of the reverse of where we see our current world right now, where the USA is a capitalistic society where we have other countries towards the other side of the world that are communist or socialist or things big words for different kinds of governments where I'm not an expert on. But essentially we had it where, imagine if you flip the roles where America was kind of you do things for the government, while you have other countries, let's say Russia, where it's we do things for the people. It's kind of a reverse, and it was kind of what they were aiming at. But that's what Paddock believed in, and that is what he was able to talk to Sophia about, another member of Kilo, and they ran off and left the Cog. They abandoned. We actually had it where Garen was a part of the Gorazni, and then he joined up with the Cog just to survive, and then he left because he's screw this, I'd rather just be living away from them. But he never considered himself stranded. That's a very important thing to remember. Garen Paddock was never a stranded. In his own mind, he wasn't. He most definitely was by the definition of what you're looking at. But that's a story for another day when we get to Paddock's video, whenever that happens. Once he left the Cog with Sophia, he kind of organized his own group of people, his own militia, and they stayed in Halvo Bay. They actually stayed there for quite a while, and it grew to be quite a few people. And his version of what he saw things as, instead of a stranded, he saw it as these are other people, whether they're survivors, stranded, former military, people who saw it as we're here to survive and we're surviving in this collective unit together. He didn't see it as just like, oh, you know, like we're the stranded because we were left behind by the cog when the hammers came down. He never saw it as like we're just ex-military, that we're done with this because of government. No, he brought in all walks of life, and the idea was that we all fight for our own collective selves. We are together in this fighting, and that's how it stayed for quite a while they were over in Halvo Bay. Now, after a while in Halvo Bay, when they got close to the end of the Locust War, they had to move everything to Seahorse Hills, which was still in Halvo Bay, but a higher area because their base was kind of destroyed. Long story short, we'll get into that again when we get to Paddock's video, but they ended up there. Sophia at this point had been taken by what we can assume Cog, and this is where Paddock kind of just lost all faith in any form of government. He was coming around to liking members of the Cog, like we had with like Baird and Cole. He was okay with them, but he lost all faith after that, believing that, you know, whether they were with or away from the Cog, he's just done. He's just done with it all. He has no trust in anybody, and that kind of leads to where we have the nomad mentality. Again, he hasn't officially like formed the Nomads, but this is the beginning of them with his group from Seahorse Hills, the group of people he still has with him when the war is over. So when the war is over, they develop this kind of mindset of like, we live solely by our own rules. We do not follow anyone else's. We do not trust anyone. We trust ourselves. That is how it is done, which was kind of where Paddock's mindset was towards the end of the war, and it kind of just adapted to the whole group itself. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, with the war over, there's no reason to be fighting on your own where you can just join up with the other groups and now become humanity again. Well, that was the thing, is that Paddock did not trust the Cog at all, and they were the ones that were kind of like the only form of government that was around once the Locust War was done with the rebuilding of the Cog, the new Cog. He was like, I want nothing to do with them. I want nothing to ever be a part of. I am not going to join them. So you would think, okay, well, he will join the Outsiders then. Well, kind of not. So I would assume after the war, his group was seen as one of the outsider camps, or at least a form of outsiders. But you need to remember, the mentality of the Nomads is that we do not follow anyone's rule. We do not trust anyone. We trust us. It is us that we trust. It is us that we follow. It is us that we fight for. That is the Nomad way. So he probably saw it as like they were a traveling group now and then because they never wanted to call one place home, because I would assume the Nomads, with how their mentality is like they don't want the Cog tailing them and trying to bring them in, because the Cog was trying to enlist outsiders. He wants nothing to do with the other outsider groups. They were probably very nice, but it's the idea of just like, I would assume the outsiders all had this kind of like unwritten rule of like trade or combat or anything, or conflict or anything like that. And Paddock and his group were probably like, no. Even if there's unwritten rules, we do not follow anyone's. We do what we want. If there is something that you do that upsets us and we retaliate or do something and you say, hey, you can't be doing that, whose rules are we listening to? Nobody's. Our rules go. That don't break any of our rules. We do what we want. So maybe there could have been some animosity towards the outsiders, and that's why they didn't do a lot with them. So as the Nomads, they traveled around a bit, and they went around all of Tyrus, which is like where we see most of the story of all of Gears, is the Tyrant continent. Or not even the continent, but the country itself. And you would probably ask, okay, well, they're traveling. Why don't they go back home to the Grozny? Why doesn't Paddock bring his people? Like, we'll just join up with the Grozny again. We'll make it to the other side of the planet, and we'll just join up with them. Garen can be home and all that good stuff. Well, it's not as simple as you think. Because in the books we learn, and we learn this from 3 also, the UIR, the Grozny themselves, aren't really existing anymore. They did probably reform under just the Grozny, but the problem is that during the books, when they go over to like all of the islands and they're doing all their stuff and they come across the UIR again, the Grozny people, you have it where at Vectis, the UIR come forward. We learn it's just the Grozny, but I use them interchangeably. And they say, hey, if it means we have somewhere to live, we'll join up with you and you'll have access to basically our emulsion rig we have set up. So the Grozny basically surrendered to become Cog citizens. Paddock does not take that lightly. You have to remember how much he dislikes the Cog. And remember 2 and 5, when we meet the Nomads and we get everything, when we get a bit more of Garen Paddock's background, we learn he wasn't a fan of the truce where the Cog was going to win the war. He was actually in the background trying to actually have it where like a missile was going to be shot off against the Cog. He was a part of that. He has nothing but any form of likeness or anything. He just has animosity towards the Cog. So imagine your home country has now kneeled down, in his eyes at least, has kneeled down and is now in servitude or has become the Cog. I have a strong feeling he would not go home to that. He would be like, I would much rather just live in the wilderness than deal with traitors. I feel he would be like, I feel that's definitely what Paddock would see. I assume he would not go home. So he probably thought, okay, well, we're just going to keep moving. We're the Nomads. That's what we're known as now. At this point, I have a feeling they'd be called the Nomads. We are going to continue to travel. At one point, from Tyrus, they actually make themselves all the way over to Vaskar. So they traveled that distance, and they aren't setting up a home shop in Vaskar. It looks more like they're like have a temporary setup, like a gypsy caravan you see now and then, where they'll put something up somewhere, but they can easily pack up and leave at any time. It seems like they're just setting up in an area, and they're kind of just calling it there for their settlement for now before they have to up and leave again for some reason, I don't know. But it does seem like the Nomads have no intention of ever finding an actual home. It looks like they are always set on just traveling, because in how they see it probably is like, this is a ruined world. We're just trying to make the best out of what is left of it, kind of. That's why you see them scavenging a lot, or like trying to make things work as they move along. So another thing we can cover quick with the Nomads are the people who are the Nomads. As we can see with like the Cog, you have former Cog civilians and other stranded outsiders that decided to join the Cog. Outsiders, you see former stranded, former Cog that come in and decide to become outsiders. The Pickers are just rabid humans, basically. That's all they are. They went from stranded to pickers. That's what you get. The Nomads are very interesting because as far as we can tell, they have the most like variety when it comes to like the population you find with them. They're all not just like, oh, we're Vaskari, or we're former Cog, or we're former Garazni, or we're former soldiers from each army. It can be anything. The Nomads will take anybody that can join their ranks. Anyone can be a Nomad. It doesn't matter where you come from, what you're doing, your previous background. They will take you in. The only thing you have to remember is that the Nomads fight for the Nomads. The Nomads are their own team. We do not fight for anyone else. We fight for ourselves. It is about survival. If you are not going to fight for us, then get out. We're going to basically abandon you, kick you out. You can leave. It doesn't matter. You're not with us. We fight all as one. We are together in this. We are the Nomads. That's how they see it. Well, you have like some communities where it's like, you know, you'll have your lazy members, your ones that are working harder, people doing this job, this. The Nomads are all like, we're one collective unit. We're one. You know, it's not like you do this, you do this, you do this. It's like, no, we're all fighting on the same page here. If people are going to go out and do something, that is a good chunk of our forces that are going out and doing that. It's not like, okay, one person go out and fix this. Now and then they'll do that, like we see in 5. They most definitely did that now and then, but that was a different story, and I have a theory as to why it was like that. So my theory is that in Vaskar, the reason we don't see a lot of Nomads out and about a lot, or the reason a lot of them are Vaskari native, is because of the fact that I believe Paddock specifically had it where the Vaskari people were going to be out and about in Vaskar trying to take care of things. So if there were any like Vaskari stranded, or there were any people that were from Vaskar originally that spoke the language, he had people from Vaskar that were out there that were able to like communicate or like talk with them and maybe set up trade or something like that. But I feel like that's what he did, because we do see there is a large walk of life with the Nomads. If you look at the background for them, where they started, it's not like they're all just Vaskari. That's not the case. Even Paddock is not Vaskari by heart. He is a Garazni. So I would assume that he probably brought them with just for like the lay of the land to figure things out, because it's not like they've been in Vaskar for a very long time. It's implied they've been there for a short amount of time, like they recently got there in the past few years. I would assume he did that, and there's probably an actual settlement somewhere where they're set up for the moment, where it's everybody else who's an actual Nomad. That's my assumption, at least. That's my theory I'm going with. That's why everyone you come across is speaking Vaskari or with a Vaskar accent, because, you know, if we're going to come across people here that are native to the land, we at least have our people from our settlement that are able to speak with them. So it's not just like, yes, Jim Bob, you over from the South Islands. We're going to go out. Oh, you came across some Vaskari soldiers, eh? Some remnants of what they had here, even though the Vaskari didn't have any form of army, really. Try and make conversation. You don't know what they're saying? Well, try your language. Let's see if that works. All right, Jim Bao's been shot. That didn't work. That's what I'm going with here. They probably had some people who were able to speak the language to talk to the locals to try and make some conversation at least. And to finish all of this off, what is their current status in the world? Well, they're actually doing pretty good. They're not doing the worst. They're not doing the best. They're doing good. They're doing fine. By what we can tell, because they're always on the move, it doesn't seem like they've had the largest issue with the swarm. They've definitely had problems with them. They've definitely come across them. It's not like they haven't had people die from the swarm, but it's not as bad as like the Outsiders. The Outsiders got hit the worst. The Outsiders were all like stationed in their own areas, and they were picked off one by the swarm. The Nomads don't deal with that, though, because they are constantly moving. It's not like they're in one place where they can just track them down. If they did that, by the time they went to where the Nomads were, they've probably already left. So I'm assuming that was probably also Paddock's plan as time went. He's like, well, if the Swarm are going to be around, let's just keep moving. It's been working so far, let's just keep doing it. And they went to Vaskar, which was like, okay, this is away from some of the burial sites. Most definitely there are some in Vaskar, but probably not as many as Tyrus or the South Islands or Cog-controlled territories, because Vaskar was neutral. So he's like, well, Vaskar, there's not going to be too many of them. Well, might as well just stick around here. We'll just travel Vaskar. So that's what they did there, and they're doing fine. Their people are more or less okay for the situation they find themselves in. They're not doing as well as the Cog. The Cog at least has walls and weaponry. They do have weapons, but I mean, they're constantly moving, so that's played to their advantage where they're doing better than the Outsiders, which the Outsiders at this point really probably aren't existent anymore. But if they are still some pockets here and there are definitely more Nomads. Like I said too, there's probably a bigger settlement somewhere for where they put everything before they start moving again, where there's probably just like hundreds to thousands of members that are probably there. I don't think Paddock would just go to Vaskar with like a handful of like 20 to 30 people. No, the Nomads are a lot bigger than that. I can promise you that. So that'll do it. That's the Nomads. Yeah, I didn't think I'd be covering the Nomads at the end of the year, but we did. I figured I talked enough about them in the other videos, but then I realized, you know, let's actually give the Nomads their own video. I think they deserve it. I think the Nomads deserve it. I think Paddock deserves it. Yeah, that'll do it. I want to thank everyone for watching. Thank everyone for making things possible. Thank the patrons for making things possible. And when we come back, the last video of the year, honestly, we'll do Harper's video. We'll just do Jonathan Harper's video, get him done with, have everything tied up well, and then next year we'll finally get into Baron, where everyone can finally get Alex Brand. Throughout the years, people have constantly asked for Brand. I will get to Alex Brand. We will have her character discussion. We'll cover everything we have from the comics. I'll talk about her stuff in the books. We'll get to Brand. I also want Brand. I'll see y'all in the next one. Later.